Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, joining you from the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, recently known as Victoria, BC, Canada. And my guest today is my dear friend, Thérèse Cator. Therese is an artist, performer, leadership coach, embodiment practitioner, and founder of Embodied Black Girl, a global community that stands for the embodied liberation of Black women and femmes and women of color globally. And part of that work is realized through the Global Healing Festival, an online annual event featuring over 20 inspiring presenters. Therese has been a coach for 13 years, has been practicing energy work since her teens, and performing and writing since childhood. We've been friends since Therese first appeared on the podcast in 2017 when we spoke about Shadow Alchemy. Since then, we've been fellow students more than once in different trainings. We've collaborated professionally by co-facilitating small groups together, and Therese has held me in some of my most vulnerable moments. At other times, she's given me really stingy feedback when I needed it. I love hearing about her upbringing and family traditions, and this conversation about how she celebrates the Wheel of the Year in her Haitian tradition has been a very long time coming. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. So Therese, it's been a while since you've been on the Numinous Podcast. It's time for an update. What identities do you lead with?
Hi, Carmen. It has been a while. And I know that you start with this question. So I was like, what identities? What identities? I would say the identities that I lead by is a mama, of course, as you know. My little one is now 5, going on 6. And a Black woman, a daughter, a sister, a teacher, birth of Haitian descendants, revolutionary descendants. I think those are some of them. Writer. There's so many, but those are some of them.
When I think of Therese, I also think first I think of you as a mother, and then I think of you as a space holder and teacher. I'm so excited that we get to chat. We talk every week, but we've never actually just sat down and talked about Wheel of the Year or like your ancestral spiritual practices that you're keeping alive for your little one, Isaiah. So I'm very excited for this. Let's start though with the term witch, because I think our spiritual practices might look similar in some ways, but I bet we have a very different relationship with that word. So would there be like an equivalent or a correlate to the term witch according to your hereditary practices from Haiti?
Yeah, it was interesting that you asked that question because I was like, which, because you sent me that question. I was like, which? It's not really a word that I grew up hearing in my household, although I was raised, as you know, in New York City. But of course, I heard it throughout. So the word was more so, my understanding was more so through like this Western lens, because there is not necessarily a direct word that means witch. Like there's the word sorcier. And I think that's like the closest to being witch. But if I had to even translate that, it would mean oracle or seer. So it was really interesting because I was like, I think my only real interaction with that word has been in my upbringing in this country, which is I'm in the Turtle Island, also known as the United States.
So what kinds of spiritual elders are there in Haitian lineage?
So it really depends on like what you have apprenticed, what is in your lineage. So for example, some people might name themselves as like medicine woman, man, person. There's also people in the voodoo lineage who are Mambo, Gan, and those are, people who go through initiations
Mm,
in order to have that, or to have that designation.
mhm,
Um, there's the word sorcier, there's voyant, there's many, many different words depending on your family and your lineage.
mm,
And there's priestess.
mm,
So I know for my family lineage, like all of those, like there are ancestors who have all of those designations.
mm, mm, mhm. And your father was a healer as well. And
Mhm.
where would he kind of fall in there? Like herbalist type or?
He was a healer. I would say medicine. He would really call himself like a medicine man. That's what he would call himself.
Mm. What do you think you're becoming, or how would you describe yourself?
I was like, actually, you said this. And I think the word would be priestess.
Mhm,
I think
mhm,
the word would be priestess. And it's really hard because so many words that I learned in my native tongue or my mother tongue.
mhm,
And there's not this direct translation. So I'm
mm,
actually finding a hard time like, okay, if I was just saying this in Creole, I would be saying it a different way. So I'm like literally having to translate it in my head and
mhm.
feeling like I'm not doing an adequate job
Mm.
of translating it.
It makes sense to me that there aren't good words to directly translate in English, but I appreciate you trying. Can you tell us a bit about how you experience the seasons and the wheel of the year? And is there, again, like, is there something kind of correlated to that in your lineage?
Yeah, I feel there definitely is because pretty much every season there's a, a celebration, right? And again, it depends on your particular family lineage of like how you're going to celebrate that. But I feel something that is overall throughout all of Haiti is celebrating the independence. And so there's like the soup jument that everyone drinks, and
What's
essentially
that?
it's a squash soup.
Mm.
It's the squash soup. So every first of the year, ever since I can remember, that is what is made. And on the first of the year, it's a celebration where you drink that. And it's essentially because the enslaved people of Haiti were not allowed to eat certain things. And jument
Oh.
was one of those things.
Mm.
And so it's a symbol of freedom.
Mm.
So every first, that's how we begin at least the Gregorian calendar year.
Mhm.
And that's actually is the date of independence. It actually lines up. It's not like, oh, we're just picking a
Right.
date. It lines
Right.
up with when it actually was declared independent. And then, of course, we have, celebrations throughout the equinoxes. And my mom, was raised with the land, both my parents actually, working with the land. So much of it is based in the seasons. So essentially, like by the time the spring equinox comes, that's a time to celebrate the coming of spring.
Mhm.
And I feel like I also have to name that many of the celebrations, because the Christian religion has had so much influence throughout, I mean, everywhere. Where it haven't they had
Yeah.
influence? There's also quote unquote what looks like Christian celebrations, but then when
Right.
you look underneath, it's so much folk.
Mm.
So throughout the year, depending, like my mom is from, both my parents are actually from Cavaillon. So there's specific celebrations throughout the year that they go through because they're from that place
Mm.
versus another place. The ones that personally that resonate with me the most, I would say, are the equinoxes and the
Mhm.
solstices. I
Mhm.
feel like there's a lot of energy around those times. But also, the other thing is that the celebrations are not on fixed days. You know how,
Mhm.
typically it's like the solstice, not the solstice, the equinox, spring equinox, it's in March, 21st, 22nd, around that
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
It's much more loose. It's like Caribbean time. It's
Okay.
like you have that season really to
Right.
celebrate it. So
Right.
you have the season like, to celebrate it. And I think also really big, and I think this is also throughout, also you find this in Mexico, which is the Day of the Dead,
Mhm.
the remembrance, and really it's like a remembrance of ancestors. So around Samhain, that's
Mhm.
a really big deal. I know in the past people would go to the cemeteries and have picnics with their ancestors, and
Mm.
there's a lot of reverence when it comes to ancestors. It's really interesting because my mom she told me this story about when she was growing up. There was a period of time that she remembers that was called rejeté. And during that time, the church like swept throughout the lands and forced people to throw out any kind of not any kind of sacred objects,
Wow.
any kind of ancestral reverence, any kind of like ancestral altars. It had to get thrown out. And she
Wow.
has that memory of
Wow.
this happening. Like, so this is within her lifetime.
Yeah.
So, what I personally always love to do, in terms of like figuring out all the clues, is like seeing what are the traditions and what are the things that don't line up, and then having a conversation, to find out, okay, well, what's underneath that.
Mhm.
I think there's the difference between the winter solstice to me is that there's still a lot of joy. It
Mm.
doesn't seem that much of like the dark night of the soul, which
Mhm.
personally is something that I experience living, on Turtle Island. And I wonder, would I have that same experience if I live there?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
wonder what the nuances would be in terms of what that looks like, because it's actually really a beautiful time of the year,
Mm.
with like the
Mhm.
best weather.
Mhm.
Whereas around around the summer, late summer to early fall, that's when you experience the floods, the hurricanes,
Oh.
and at different points of the year, drought.
Oh,
So to me,
right.
it doesn't really line up exactly the same way that it
Mhm.
lines up seasonally,
Yeah.
because the summer, that's when it gets either
Right.
really hot.
Yeah.
There's, the hurricanes are coming through,
Yeah.
unfortunately, as we're seeing right now, that's happening in Puerto Rico.
Mhm.
But that's when that happens throughout,
Right.
the Caribbean.
Right. So that would be the more sort of fearsome time because it's not like the Western tradition of being worried about thimble winter, the winter that never ends for years on end. You're like worried about, yeah, drought and homes destroyed and things like that in the summer. That's really interesting. So how do you personally integrate that as a person who I know you to be very connected to your ancestors, especially to your dad, who's on the other side? How how do you do this for your kiddo? Like, what's the wheel of the year look like at the Cator household?
It really is based on ancestral ancestral reverence and keeping the ancestors alive, because so much of what I shared with the period called Wujite that happened throughout was a denial of that. And I
Mhm.
actually have these thoughts, or I've been thinking in my minds of like, how much is the disconnection of ancestors connected to a lot of the turmoil that is being experienced. And this is not to discredit what, for example, America has done, the policies of America, Canada, France has done specifically to Haiti, because there are policies and things that have done over the past hundreds of years that have caused this level of turmoil. And I ask myself, can an even deeper returning back to ancestral traditions and reclamation of that, um, change that around?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that last August, um, came up really clearly was that, in August, this was the time when our ancestors had a huge ceremony in the name of freedom.
Mm.
So before the Declaration of Independence, there was a huge ceremony, and with sacrifices and dances and etc. that happened in Haiti by by the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that ceremony was actually seen as the catalyst or the domino that
Mm-hmm.
allowed all the other dominoes to fall throughout the
Mm-hmm.
world in terms of liberation for Black, Indigenous, and folks of color. And it
Mm-hmm.
started in Haiti. So to me, it's like celebrating those things are important and seeing how they align with where we are seasonally as well, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes
It does
sense.
make sense to me, and
Yeah.
especially even on like where we are, um, as I when I talk about this in Quest, it's like, where are we in the season of a human journey? So it's like, where are cultures? Some cultures are more immature, America, Canada, etc. More indigenous cultures, Haiti included, are more mature. And so their role is to do the ceremony and the rituals to help the other, if we were in a smaller community, be like to help the adolescents know what to do
Mhm.
next, right? And so it's like, yes, I can see how you keeping those traditions alive creates an anchor point in the morphogenic field, almost in the ripple effect of like, yep, here are people who have mature spiritual practice, and the reclamation of that, we don't know how that would influence the rest of us and the rest of our politics and institutions, etc. So it's making sense to me anyway. I can feel it. I feel excited
Mhm.
by that. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that, because that's something that I've been exploring for years, and I'm fortunate my father, as you know, is no longer with us. So I feel like there's many of those stories that are lost, but my mom still is. So she still tells me stories. And also I have to say, there's so much through food.
Uh-huh.
Um, so there's, depending on the season, every season has food that's associated with it. So
Mm-hmm.
things that we will cook traditionally as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned, with like the first of the year is jourma, but throughout the year, there are things that you also make,
Mm-hmm.
um,
I've
to
seen your
celebrate
spring
that
plates.
time.
I know. I'm like, what are you eating? Show me what you're eating. Maybe tell the listeners. Like, so then at the spring equinox, what would you eat?
Um, I think during the spring equinox there would be mowu, which is codfish.
Mm-hmm.
There would also be eggs and beets. Those are some of the things that we would eat. Um, by the time we get to the summer, there's a lot of fruits. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like celebrating that bounty, so there's a lot of fruits. There's a lot of, I know you had talked to me about the hibiscus. Remember, you
Yeah,
have the
I have
hibiscus.
that
So
in the
there's
cookbook. Mm-hmm.
there's drinking hibiscus, which is also, um, related to freedom. It's actually the unofficial flower, and it's called like the flower of liberation.
So they were drinking that right around the ceremony time that sort of kicked off this global spirit of revolution. My
Well,
gosh, I love that.
I don't know if they drank it then, but I know we
Okay.
do.
Right, you do
I
now,
know
right?
that, yeah, we do. And there's so
Mhm.
many plants that are associated with the season. So
Mm.
my mom, both my mom and dad work with many, many plants. And actually, I just told you before we pressed record that I hurt my foot, my leg actually. And yesterday my mom came with like oils and leaves and like was massaging my leg, which hurt like hell, but it feels better today.
Right.
So
Oh.
there's also working with a lot of plant medicine
Mm.
as
What
well.
would you eat as you're getting then more towards that honoring of the Day of the Dead, or like what we would consider like a harvest home time in the autumn equinox, or like that fall season here? What would you eat then?
I think it would depend what your ancestors love.
Right. Okay, right. You're eating like it's spirit food. So if they loved
Yeah.
yams, you're serving yams. If they loved chicken, you're serving chicken. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. And
Yeah.
then what about winter solstice?
I think honestly that's when they're, first of all, my mom would say that they would only have, her growing up, they would only have meat very rarely. So
Mm,
meat was something that was not part of like the diet, where I feel like, especially in westernized, meat is like a daily thing.
mhm,
But at that time, if it was available, like they would have ham,
mm,
and they cook in a very special way.
mm,
Um, so like meats and rice is all the time.
mhm.
But I think like meats and rice and cremas would, like, there's not one, winter solstice, Christmas season that we haven't had cremas,
What's
which
that?
I don't know what the translation is. It's this alcoholic drink that you
Mm,
make with like eggs, and it basically, at the end result, is white. It's
okay.
white at the end, um and that's what
Is it
we
kind
would
of
drink.
eggnoggy?
It's like eggnog. It's like
Okay.
eggnog, but it doesn't. I've
But
tasted
with
eggnog, and
rum or
it
something?
tastes.
Okay.
It's. I don't like eggnog, but
Right.
this cremas is. It's so good.
Okay, how do
It's
you
so
spell
so
that?
good.
Because I'm gonna Google that. I'm gonna find that recipe and try that out.
I think it's spelled Kremas.
Okay. Mm, nice.
Yeah, Kremas. So it's yeah, so it's white because I think it's also made with like evaporated milk with things
Mm,
like nutmeg and coconut, cinnamon, um, almond,
oh my
and
gosh,
rum.
sounds
And
so good.
rum.
And rum.
Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah. Okay.
rum is big, right? Rum
This
is
seems like
huge.
next level eggnog. I can't wait to try it. So you, like me, are in the position where, okay, there's not this entirely intact lineage, but there are clues, there's some stories, but it's a lot of fill in the blanks or kind of like connect the dots, which I'm finding for myself means that it's a very creative process. I have to be intuitive. I have to, I have to follow my instincts and just trust that it's okay, that it's not going to replicate any pristine prior tradition, because maybe even my ancestors didn't have a pristine prior tradition. I don't know. How would I know? So,
Mhm.
as you are creating and connecting the dots, where do you draw inspiration?
Mm. I feel like so much of the inspiration is through the conversations with elders.
Mhm.
That's really where a lot of the inspiration comes from. And sometimes oftentimes they have stories, and they say this is what happened,
Mm.
at this time. And I feel like for me, part of my reclamation journey is going actually a level deeper and really taking the next level and writing it down. And I have been writing it down, but I feel like, okay, there needs to be a bit more momentum behind that. It's like
Mm,
it's more leisurely, and I feel like there needs to be a bit momentum behind that, because I feel like if I did that, it would synthesize even more.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that makes
If,
sense to me.
if
Mhm.
that.
And then what about creativity in general? Because you're a very creative person. You had a career as an actress, you're a writer, you're a performer, you've done, you're a very creative person. So, can you talk a little bit about your relationship with creativity at this time in your life?
Yeah, I always have said that I felt like creativity was like one of the closest experiences of the divine.
Mm,
Um, and it felt, especially I feel with like writing and performing, like for me, it was being able to, I know the power that stories have to be
mm,
able to shift someone's perspective or show them something in a different way, or really even beneath that to feel. So, that phrase that's often used, you have to feel it to heal it.
mhm,
And so many times, with transformation or with change, it's like if you can get even the person who disagrees with you to feel something,
mm,
it has the power to change. And
mm,
that's what I've always been attracted with through storytelling and creativity, because it's different avenues opposed to just the cognitive way of talking about it. And which is why I love, somatics. I mean,
mhm,
all so much of creativity is somatics, right? I was like, oh, I've
mhm.
been doing somatic practices all of my life. Um, is that instead of going about it in a cognitive way, you are it's being approached, or I'm able to approach it through a way where I don't have to use words. Or if I'm using words, it's if it's on, let's say, on a stage, there's a bit of distance,
Mhm,
and the storytelling, as someone is watching the story, they're becoming more invested in those characters. They're seeing themselves and other people. And that's learning, and also change can happen through that.
mhm, mhm. At this time in your life, what does creativity mean to you? Because it's one thing when you're an emergent adult, or you don't have a child, like what does it mean to you as a
Sleep.
mother? Yeah, exactly. You're not getting as much sleep. Like, what does it, what's the relationship you have with your own creativity right now?
I feel like so much of my creativity is like and I think it's always been the case, is just getting out into nature
Mm,
so that I have access to it. That's where I have the most access to it. Like if I'm feeling creatively stuck, it's like go out to nature.
mm,
And something will always come through, whether a message through something, or a bird will sing, or I'll see a flower. There will always be a message.
mm,
So to me, it's not necessarily in just something that I have to do, because as you
mhm,
know, with having a little human being, like my little human being is not in school today, they're out sick, and things change. Things are always in flux.
mhm,
So it's making time, pockets of space to get out into nature,
mm,
and then pockets of space to create. Like before I was a mom, I would have long I can take like a week, or, oh, let me just think about this. Let me just dream about this. And now I have to take just it could be like 30 minutes. And
mhm,
okay, what can I do in 30 minutes? Or what I can do, on a weekend morning. So
mhm,
it's not the same. So
mhm,
it's something that I'm constantly negotiating with, and
mhm,
and seeing,
mhm.
okay, what can I do and what can I not do? in terms of creativity.
I hear what you're saying, and of course, I remember that as like a single mom with a 5-year-old and working full time, right? Like I get what you're talking about, and yet, Therese, you are so generative. You do so much, you create so much, you make so much. And of course I'm thinking as an entrepreneur, you have so many offerings and you're always training and you're always learning. And so what do you do when you're in like a situation where, I don't know, like the thing you've created, you kind of feel done with? Like, do you ever get into a creative slump where you're just like, yeah, I've just been doing this too much and I need to do something new? Or like, how do you negotiate that? Again, like as a mom, it's like there's a certain kind of ease to just doing the same thing all the time, right? You're like trying to have a routine. You're trying to like, feel like you are in flow with life, but you seem to be a person who needs to be making new things or doing new things all the time. Is that true for you? How do you negotiate that?
Actually, that's something that I'm working on. Like I've been consistently working on with not needing to make new things all the time and be in devotion to just a few things and seeing what that feels like and seeing what can emerge. So instead of I can create a new thing. Like you're like, let's do this. I'm like, I'm down. I'll create a new thing like right now. If I could,
Yeah.
like every day, I would be, because I feel like there's so many. I just don't have the resources as like Beyonce or someone like that.
Right.
There's so many ideas and so many things that I want to do. And for me, I feel like in the past, it's been a way that I've like squandered energy. So really trying to stay focused on a few things. And if my focus wants to move to something else, then really looking at those few things and then making a decision of like, okay, do I have to let one of those go? Do I have capacity?
Right.
Because now, opposed to like when I was like 20 years old, I'm thinking more about legacy. And I'm also thinking of like, this life is finite, like at least in this incarnation. And what do I truly want to leave behind? And if I'm doing 1,000 different things and I'm every single day, it's something new and my focus changes, it's really harder. I mean, I can leave a legacy. This is just what it is. But for me, I feel like I would be more satisfied with there are specific things I do want to do.
Ooh, tell me, like what?
I feel like I want to write a book, right? I do. I know you're right. You have a book that's coming out and I'm so excited for it. And I want to write a book. I don't know exactly what it's about. Like, I don't know. This is the thing. There's so many things that I have done and how to synthesize it to create something that's meaningful. And I feel like that's purposeful. Maybe it's like looking at a certain slice and then moving to another slice and then moving to another slice. But I'm really thinking about legacy because I'm like, wow, life goes by fast. And that's important for me, what I leave behind for Isaiah. And that goes back to having these practices that he can also draw upon. Like, because I was raised in that way. Like throughout the year, we had different foods that we ate and practices that we had and ceremonies and that we would take part of. And, with seeing the elders in my family pass away and a lot of their stories die along with them, legacy and passing those stories on is really important to me. And that also informs my creativity.
This is making me think of the writing of people like Ben Okri and, people who have woven magic into creative writing that is like, I could imagine you having like a memoir that you are just writing to Isaiah, but everybody else wanting to read it too, so that there's like stories woven in. of like ancestors in Haiti, also growing up in New York, and then like what your current magical practice is, the salve your mom made for your leg, like I could just see
Mm.
that all being woven in. And that I want that book. I want that book. And so it is.
And
So
so
it
it is.
is. So what is your kind of personal edge these days with your visibility and
Mm.
self-expression around creativity? You have the Global Healing Festival that just happened. Literally thousands of people come. Now, I know one of the kind of sneaky things you do is you invite all these illustrious other speakers, and then you like give yourself a teeny tiny amount of the time. So I, I sense that you also have an edge, even though you've done acting school, you've like gone very far in Hollywood. There's like, but even you seem to have an edge with visibility and self-expression. What are you working on? Where's your growth edge with that right now?
Yeah. You mentioned Hollywood, and I was like, wow, I was like so naive thinking it was about art. But finding out the hard way, like, wow, it's not about art. It's actually a miracle that art comes out of there. But
Right.
yeah, it really is. And there are some lovely people that I've met and it's clear that it's not where I'm supposed to be.
Mhm.
um But in terms of my growth edge, it's like I've said this to you before. Like I'm a hermit. Like I really am. Like I could go and live like in a cabin and just be good. Like I'm
Yeah.
good. I'm good. Like I'm good. And so it's actually hard for me to like get on social media on a daily basis. I'll be
Mhm.
really honest. Like it's hard for me because I'm like I could just go outside and go into nature or take a nap or spend some time with Isaiah, and I don't think about like, oh, I need to document
Right.
this. So
Right.
it's not like a natural thing for me to document things.
Wow, that's so funny because it has become natural. I'm like, I love social media. And then I just, as you were talking, I'm like, and why is that? And what I realized, it's like, it's because so I can watch videos of me.
Oh my
I
gosh.
literally am like, I have to document this so I can see the look on my face when like the pumpkin grows, or so that I can like, you know, I don't know, hear me like talk about something that seemed like a good idea. Like I am the person who watches my TikTok videos. So of course I want to
So
document
you
these
got all
things.
those views. You gave
Exactly.
yourself all those
They're
views.
all me. They're all me being like, yeah, I totally agree with you, Carmen. That is
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh.
but it's an effort for you. That's
It's
like
an
not your
effort.
jam. Mhm.
It's an effort. It really is an effort to have to do that. Especially, I feel like I probably was better at it before having a little child and like so many
Right.
other like elders that I'm taking care of that I'm responsible for, and I just it feels like a much lower priority, and it's so much of visibility is tied to that. I think
Mhm.
getting your message, your name, what you do out there in the world. So I feel like that's constantly my growth edge. And also of like, I just want to live life. Like
Yeah.
I'm fine with like being a hermit.
Mhm.
And there's another part that of me that definitely has had the visibility wound,
Mm.
of
Describe that. Mhm.
feeling invisible when I didn't want to be invisible.
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
And I feel
Mhm.
that so much of the world, I mean, especially I'll speak for myself, especially as a Black woman, um, and the amount of time or the amount of years and dedication that I've had and that I've done, especially with coaching and somatic work, and not receiving the same amount of recognition as I
Mhm.
see like white folks
Mhm.
or white women who might just take a piece of
Mhm.
what Black women do and receiving so much visibility, so many accolades. So I feel like part of that visibility is also tied to like nourishment,
Mm-hmm.
like, and being taken care of and feeling like, oh, wow, I did that and no one cared. And now this person is doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like they're on the cover of this magazine and now they have
Mm-hmm.
this brand deal and that brand deal. And like
Mm-hmm.
I'm struggling
Mm-hmm.
to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that wound has been very much linked to the wound of capitalism that has impacted us all in many different ways, but especially as someone who is in a Black body, a Black femme body, it's definitely impacted me in specific ways.
Yeah,
And
for
that's
sure.
a lot of grief. Like even talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
it's like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, I can feel the
Mm-hmm.
grief coming forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I know this. We've sat for years now being like, how do we connect with elders? How do we, like, how do you find these people? They have to be out there, and it's like, it shouldn't be so miraculous that you finally found elders within a somatic lineage, within, a healing lineage that are finally kind of being featured, profiled, lifted up, so that you can find them. Because I know you have searched for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
so many times I've said, "Well, I think it just has to be you, Therese. Like, I just think it's you. Like, this is the sad state." And so, yeah, it makes sense to me, that feeling of like erasure is made even more acute when you
Mm-hmm.
see so many white bodied people, white women, myself included, who really don't have to do that much to get amplification. And then even just trying to find trainings, communities, lineages for you has been it's just been such a long journey. It's been so
Mm-hmm.
long. Yeah. Be
Mm-hmm.
so tiring.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of like that, what you're saying with like my innate desire to be a hermit and having this, it's like, it could be very complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
Complex things to hold and to be with. Um, so part of me wants to be a hermit and then part of me wants to be seen and acknowledged. And
Mm-hmm.
I think many folks can relate to that.
For
Maybe.
sure. Well, and like you said, the wound of racialized capitalism is like, and would like to be paid, and would like to not have to, not have to do things that you don't want to have to do, like social media and all that kind of stuff. It would just be great to not have to work so hard for the same kind of recognition.
Yeah.
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 The Global Healing Festival, which of course as a white woman I didn't attend, but I because I got to be like in the wings seeing you produce such an amazing event, and like hearing people, their experience of it is so amazing. And so it seems almost like one of the things you're doing to kind of get around that feeling of being a hermit is you're amplifying other people. You're amplifying other women and non-binary folks, and who are also doing this healing work. So, thank you for doing that. Thank you for putting that out into the world. I know how impactful it's been. It must be
Mm.
tiring.
Yeah, I mean, I gave myself a lot of time to do it, but there's so much, as you know, if you're
Mm-hmm.
producing any kind of event, there's so much to do. But it was for me healing. Like I was surprised that how healing it was for me. I'm like, shouldn't I have expected this? Shouldn't I have known this? But it
Mm-hmm.
actually, I was surprised how healing it was for me and how there was just such radical generosity from
Mm.
each person who shared. Like
Mm.
what I really felt like nothing was held back.
Mm.
I know how when you
Mm.
go to things and you're like people are holding this back. Like this is my ace and I'm holding this. And it was like it was just like there was just radical generosity
Mm.
and people shared, the honored guests, they shared really from their their soul and from their best work.
Mm.
And some of them, it was completely new work that they were sharing for the first time. So
Mm.
that was really beautiful, and it was really, really healing.
That is a testament to you, Therese, the safeness that you create, that they can try new things, and also that your generosity, the spirit of generosity that you embody, obviously inspired them, I would think, because, yeah, I know exactly what you mean when you go to some kind of event and it's like, I'm going to give you all my best B-level stuff. all my best bleedingly
D
obvious
level.
advice. Yeah. And then I'm going to tell you, you can pay extra to come and get my my actual, like, the ace, right? So I totally know that. So, but it's a testament to you, how
Mm.
generous you are, that they would want to give back in that kind of way, I think. So here's the last question that I have for you. Where are you finding the most joy and pleasure in your life these days?
Joy and pleasure. I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
already just love hearing you say it that way. You're like, like you just know. Yeah, okay, sorry, I interrupted, but I just have to amplify. I feel joy and pleasure hearing you say the words joy and pleasure.
Yeah, joy and pleasure. I feel like it's so important. And that's one of the reasons why I love somatic work. Because you go into as you know, I go into like the hard stuff,
Mm,
right? A lot of the hard stuff comes up. But then it gives me the capacity to have more joy in just experiencing like an amazing meal. I love food.
mm,
Like, we probably should have talked even more about food, but food is like huge for us. Like, we need to eat in this household. If there's no food, like, it's like not good. It's If there's a level above hangry, that would be it. But so, I mean, just like enjoying good food,
mm,
self pleasure. That's like really
mm.
big for me right now. Just like having time for self pleasure, um, nature,
Mm,
and of course, Isaiah. Like, that's my
mm,
so much joy. So much joy.
mm.
Like, the joy that he has for life, like, he swings from joy to like rage. But the thing is, like, he has that whole spectrum of emotions available to him. And when he
Mm,
is in joy, it's like, wow, it inspires me
mm,
to feel that much joy, to
mhm,
feel that much joy. And as you know, for the past few years, it's been so hard. Like, we experienced
mhm,
so much loss during the pandemic.
mhm,
And it was like shit hitting the fan after shit hitting the fan. That was the feeling over and over. So it's like anytime I can get some pleasure and joy, I like pump it. Like, let's go. Let's pump up this pleasure and joy. Let's pump this up, because
mm,
that actually gives me energy for and sustains me for what's next.
mhm, mhm,
Like, right
mhm,
after the Global Healing Festival, or like during the Global Healing Festival, a loved one called me and I had to go assist with an emergency birth. And the Global Healing Festival was what sustained me through that,
mm,
which ended up being weeks after,
mhm.
gave me that energy, and like my cup was overflowing that I was able to give. So I've been really lucky, and I hope, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 So
When I see your joy, I love your love for Isaiah. And so
Aw.
when I see him excited about, like, a simple, like, the blue popsicle I sent, or like, talking about his elephants, or drawing planets, or like, even you telling a story about him loving purple, I
Loves
see and
purple and
feel. Yeah,
rainbow.
right. And rainbow, it's like, that is very sustaining, and thank you for reminding us how important it is to pump that up so that we have some gas in the tank for all the other stuff that's coming at us. So thank you for being such an excellent role model. And thanks for sharing so much on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Carmen. I feel like this was just like one of our conversations.
I know. It's
With
been
you
too
asking
long.
more questions, right?
Yeah. It's been too long since last time, but it's because, it's like we should record more. Yeah. No, thank you so much for being here, my friend. I love you.
I love you too. Thank you.
I wish we lived closer so I could experience firsthand the love and care and healing that must be at the table and in the food at her house. It's inspirational. Continue to be inspired by following Therese on Instagram or signing up for her newsletter at theresecator.com, and I'll link to those in the show notes at numinouspodcast.com. I didn't see any downloads from Haiti this week, but Therese's home state of New Jersey representing with healthy download numbers, also home, of course, to the boss man himself. Thank you to all my listeners in the beautiful Garden State. And finally, remember that The Spirited Kitchen is available for pre-order online or from your local independent bookseller. Just ask them to bring it in. And then bring your receipt back to my website to receive your instant bonus downloads. Just go to the cookbook tab at carmenspagnola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.